Welcome to the Competitive 40k podcast brought to you by Vanguard Tactics. This is the Warhammer 40k podcast where we analyse the meta and develop strategies to help you become a competitive 40k player. I'm your host, Stephen Box, and it is my mission to raise the standard of the game both on and off the tabletop. Now, this is episode 2 of season 2, and we have an epic podcast lined up for you today. I interview the number 1 Chaos player from last year, which is Don Hooson, and we go over all things Death Guard. We talk about how to play Death Guard, how to beat Death Guard, secondary picks for them, what you should avoid when you take against them, and we really dive in deep into some of the rules interactions, but not only that, some sportsmanship elements. And then after this show, I have a very, very important announcement to tell you about, and it's actually quite difficult to record as it involves myself and a sportsmanship issue that I've had, and I'm going to do a full video talking about exactly the interactions that took place with it. So I'd really like you to listen to the end of this podcast and really, sort of divulge that, and then head over to the Vanguard Tactics YouTube, where on the by the 22nd of August, this video would have been put up, recorded, edited, all about sportsmanship and fair play, and where I made a mistake in my list writing. And again, it's all about intentional versus unintentional sportsmanship. But anyway, I'm sure you will find it extremely valuable, and it will cause a really fantastic place for conversation. And as you know, I really want to be at the forefront of sportsmanship, so I'm more than happy to take that first step forward, admit where I was wrong, where I made a mistake, and how we can correct things going forward. So anyway, I really hope you enjoy this podcast, and let's go over to that interview with Don now. Don, welcome to the show. How you doing, mate?
Pretty good.
You keeping well through this this time?
Definitely. Fortunately, my job in imaging has basically kept me doing the same thing I always do. So
Happy days. And we've been trying to organise this podcast for a while. I think we spoke about it before 9th drop, didn't we? About getting you on. And then obviously 9th drop, we have the Death Guard, we had Psychic Awakening, and I thought, let's just leave it until it's all out. And I think this is going to be a fantastic episode. So what is it, Don, that really for you kind of really, number one, got you into 40k in the first place? And then second of all, why is it that you've got such a soft spot for Chaos?
So what got me into 40k to begin with was, of course, back in high school, someone introduced me to Warhammer Fantasy. And this is right after the Skaven army came out, which is the Chaos Ratmen.
Yeah.
And I just absolutely loved it. The idea of, these rat people with, machine guns and whatnot in the medieval setting was alluring. After, a year or so went by, I got introduced to Tau, which of course I was a Gundam fanboy at the time. So that got me into 40k. And, after so many years, finally got back into it after, university, and now I'm starting to play Chaos more, primarily because I love the faction as a whole. It also probably goes back to my love of the Skaven race from Warhammer Fantasy, but it's nice to play an army that it doesn't really have all the tools that the Loyalist version does, and to do well with it just makes you feel so much better than going, here's my Iron Hands Proviathan list, or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know what you mean, Don. I mean, Chaos have got, everything, surely. They've got the Primaris Chaos Marines, they've got it all, They've got all the tools, mate. I don't know what you're talking about. But no, I certainly agree with you there. They are lacking a few kind of elements, and it's really interesting to see, I think, from a sort of a tactician's point of view, how do you plug those weak areas?
So one of the things that I tended to do a lot, which I do still do quite a fair bit, is I tend to create a lot of skew type lists where it usually focuses on one part and takes it to an extreme, which can or cannot be a good thing, but I normally tend to aim it to counter whatever the meta currently is. So it works out fairly well, whether it's, 3 Corn Lord of Skulls, or whether it's, the Purge Daredeo list, or anything like that. Just something that is able to not be affected as much by what the meta currently does and to damage it significantly.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there, and actually that's really similar to how I approach list building. I love the kind of, as we sort of spoke about pre-recording, some of the understrength codexes like Blood Angels at the time, and the reason why I took them to the LVO is because they absolutely smashed Iron Hands. They were a really good counter to Iron Hands, so I went for a real extreme build of just everybody's got either a Thunderhammer or some sort of sanguinary blade, and yeah, it does really, really well. You obviously get the hard matchups though, don't you? Maybe we can talk about some of those. So I really want to focus on the sort of Death Guard side of things, because that's kind of, is that where you're playing at the moment, or are you kind of, dabbling with a bit of Chaos Space Marines, bit of Death Guard? Where is it that you're at the moment?
So since ninth has dropped, I've mostly just been looking at Death Guard as a whole. Um, for the most part, their points didn't go up a whole lot. They do look like they play the mission fairly well because they don't require, unless you're playing the Poxmongers, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But unless you're playing a very certain style of Death Guard list, they do not have to be next to each other at all, which the ninth edition missions require that you are all over the board.
Yeah, because we didn't obviously really see Death Guard, did we, in 8th edition? So what is it that's potentially, change things to sort of bring Death Guard to the front line, in the forefront of people's minds, in, bringing them to the tabletop, really? So what is it is it ninth, or has it been Psychic Awakening, or is it a culmination of things?
So it's definitely a combination of both. When the Psychic Awakening dropped, granted you didn't get to see a whole lot of it because of COVID, everyone shut down, not a lot of tournaments. But the Psychic Awakening was like a whole another codex worth of rules that got added on to Death Guard. Like it's like 3 pages of stratagems. Like I think it was somewhere in the range of like 20 pages of just Death Guard rules, and it buffed them so much that everyone was looking at it, and the amount of lists that started coming out was pretty ridiculous if you looked at the actual like Death Guard groups and things like that. Um, on top of that, with ninth edition not really raising the cost on a whole lot of this stuff by a lot. I mean, like Plague Marines went up 2 points. The infamous Plague Burst Crawler went up 30 points from the version it used to be. And on top of that, they can do demon engines really, really well. And now that you can shoot while in combat, their demon engines are amazing.
Okay, nice. So yeah, like you said, it's a real combination of things, of points, the mission, which we'll talk about, shortly, as you've already alluded to, about them being able to play individually. So what is it that, what's their shtick? So if somebody's like looking at Death Guard, they look at the models and they like them, how would you kind of, if you had to sort of do a one sentence, how would you describe the Death Guard?
So it would be an army that is not going to shoot your opponent off the table, but it will stick around long enough to grind it out.
Okay. And is that just from their sheer resilience?
So it's a combination of they are very durable for what you're basically paying for, and they have the ability to, as soon as you get within a certain range, become the highest damaging codex in the game as far as I'm aware.
Nice, nice. That's quality. And I think it's going to be fantastic to start to see more Death Guard at the table. And what I thought would be great is, because I haven't seen much of, Death Guard on the table during 8th edition, so I can really look at this from a perspective of, I got a little bit of an idea. I played them at the weekend at the Vanguard Tactics Grand Series, and I was actually quite surprised by some of the things they can do. So I'd really love to dive into some of those combos and builds and things. So the typical Death Guard Marine, you're looking at, they've got their, is it a 5+ Feel No Pain, or is it a 6+ that they have inbuilt?
So they have a 5+ Feel No Pain. One of the best ways to look at the Death Guard Codex as a whole is if it is something that is specifically Death Guard, they have the 5+ Feel No Pain. If it's anything at all that is a unit in another codex that Death Guard can use, it does not.
Right, okay, cool. Nice. So like you said, some of the potential engines and things, yeah, that would obviously be where you're maybe drawing from other codexes potentially.
Definitely. Like the Defiler is in Chaos Space Marines, the Predator is in Chaos Space Marines, the Cultist is in Chaos Space Marines, and there's a couple others too. But if it's not, if it's something that could be seen in another codex, then it doesn't have disgusting resilient. But you can also give them disgusting resilient,
Okay. Oh, nice. Oh,
not cultists,
okay.
but
No,
everything else.
yeah, we'll talk about that. That sounds good because at the moment in the Chaos Codex, Defilers, a lot of the big vehicles, they do not get any form of Legion benefit or anything, do they? Like we saw with Marines, now, a Repulsor can have the Ultramarine, ability to fall back and shoot, or it can, we've seen Thunderfire cannons with, Imperial Fists get extra damage, but they haven't updated that for Chaos yet, which I was really hoping they would at some point, so that we could see these bigger vehicles and things get access to Legion traits.
Yeah, so right now the only things that actually get Legion traits in the Death Guard Codex are their infantry and their Demon Princes,
Right. Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah. Okay. So they again, like even the Plague Burst crawlers and stuff. Do they get access to things, or is that something that you can again give them?
So you can, if you are one of the plague companies, you can give your Legion trait to that plague company's vehicles.
Right. Okay. And the plague companies, they are in Psychic Awakening, aren't they? That's what you kind of alluded to. Like you got the 20 new pages there, and so how does that work? You've got your Death Guard army. Can you then start to allocate these out depending on detachments? How does it work?
Yep. So long as your entire detachment is a Death Guard detachment, meaning that there's no Nurglings, there's no Noise Marines, there's no Magnus, anything like that, you can give it an additional keyword, which is the Plague Company keyword. There are 7 Plague Companies, and each one definitely fits a certain style of play. But so long as they are all in that same Plague Company, they get the benefits of the Warlord Train, Stratagem, and Relic. The only ones that do not benefit from a Plague Company are Mortarion, and then Typhus only benefits from his own Plague Company, even though currently he can be in any Plague Company
Okay.
without breaking it.
Right. Okay. So he can be in any, but doesn't get the benefit apart from his own one.
Correct.
Okay, and is there anything that people are making mistakes in their list building? You said there about the Nurgling. So, am I right? If you've got Nurglings in that detachment, does it break it?
It will break it because they are not Death Guard units.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. Nice. That's good. Because it's always one of those things that sometimes, like the odd line here and there, is kind of overlooked, isn't it? And people just assume that it's fine. So, it's nice to sort of clarify that for people that are in the list building stage. Okay, so what are some of the standout ones that you're building with some of these detachments? Obviously, we don't want to go through all. Did you say all 7 of them? But what are a couple of ones?
7.
What are the couple of there that you think? Okay, this is a really nice standout one for me.
So the one that I've been loving to use currently, because with 9th edition, I felt like Mortarion was able to come back on the table. I add him into my list as a super heavy, not super heavy, a Supreme Command.
Yep.
Which also now unlocks the relics and whatnot for the plague companies below him. Whereas normally, if your warlord's from a certain plague company, you can only take that one relic for that warlord.
Okay.
However, I've been using the Inexorable, which is one of the 2 tank style plague companies. There's the Inexorable and the Poxmongers. The most common one that you'll see around is the Poxmongers because they can give their vehicles a 4+ symbol save if they're a demon engine.
Right. Yep.
As long as they're within 7 inches of the guy with the relic.
Right.
The reason why I've been liking
is that any demon engine?
any Poxmongers demon
Okay.
engine.
Yeah.
But I've been using the Inexorable because they do not have to clump up, and all their both the stratagems, the relic, and the Warlord trait are all amazing for them.
Okay. So what's the Warlord Train?
So the Warlord trait is it goes on to, of course, your Warlord or the guy that you give an extra Warlord trait to, and every enemy vehicle within 7 inches. Basically, if any of your inexorable units fire, whether it's shooting or close combat against any of those vehicles within 7 inches of your Warlord, they increase their AP by 1.
Very nice.
And especially when
nice.
the majority of your weapons that you're shooting are AP1 or AP2, it bumps up to AP2, AP3, or even bolters become AP1, and it does increase your damage significantly against those partner targets, which are vehicles.
Yeah. And obviously now you can shoot, you can move and shoot those vehicles without the penalty, can't you? Which is great.
Yes, that is one of the big benefits, which is back in 8th edition when vehicles did suffer that, it was one of the sore spots when Marines got all their traits put on their vehicles. And the Death Guard trait, which is move and fire heavy weapons without penalty, was not on theirs.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's it's because they hit on 4s. Is that correct?
They do. So
Yeah.
every demon engine is BS4 and weapon skill 4, with a few small exceptions, namely like the Helldrake and the Lord Discordant.
Yeah.
And then of course a couple Forge World units. But for the most part, every demon engine that you look at, you can pretty much just assume weapon skill plus skill 4.
Yeah. And then obviously when they were moving, they're going to that sort of 5, which was just at the point where it's just no point taking them, is it really? Especially like the Defiler, because it wants to be able to fight in all phases of the game. It wants to be able to move, shoot, and ultimately get in combat. So we can touch on that in a bit later. Okay, cool. So that's one of the 7 you're looking at, and I actually played against that at the weekend. Alex Petford I played was running that, and that 4++ invulnerable save is extremely hard to crack. A 4+ invulnerable save can be so swingy, can't it? And
it can be.
And that can really turn the tide in a game for you, which is, absolutely brilliant. And you get this for free, right? You don't have to pay CPs for this extra ability or anything?
So that one's just a relic for the Poxmongers.
Okay.
So long as it is your free relic, you get it for free.
Amazing. And what's their stratagem then?
So for the Inexorable, their relic is every time that the guy kills a dude, you can heal a Inexorable vehicle for 1 wound, to a maximum of 3 wounds per phase, and that's within 18 inches of that guy. They have 2 stratagems, one of which is for 1 CP, give up to 3 of your Inexorable vehicles the Inexorable Advance trait, which is the Death Guard trait. So that's advance and fire assault weapons without penalty, rapid fire at 18 inches instead of half, and move and fire heavy without penalty. Which everyone got hung up on the move and fire heavy without penalty, but I use things like Bloat drones with heavy Blight launchers.
Mm-hmm.
So they've advanced constantly with their assault weapons and fire those.
Nice. Yeah.
And then of course we have their other stratagem, which is, it's one of those things that's extremely niche, but when it does go off, it is, I shouldn't say game breaking, but very, very powerful, which is when a enemy infantry unit charges any of your Inexorable units, you can subtract 2 from the charge.
Yeah, strong. Yeah, that's very good. So
especially become, at deep strike.
Yeah, they become like a Gravis tank, don't they? Which, again, Marines just getting built for free, but yeah, it is super strong. And also, like, if you're not aware of that, it can really catch you out, can't it?
It can.
Actually, that's a bit of a point there. So, let's say, because I think, let's say you were coming, you're playing against an opponent and they deep strike down within 9 inches of this tank. This is one of those things in the game where obviously it can form a bit of a gotcha moment, can't it?
It can.
And it's one of those that it's a really weird interaction, because it's not your place to say, by the way, do you know I have this stratagem and I will use it if you declare a charge on me, because ultimately then you're telling your opponent what tactics and strategies you're going to use. But on the other hand as well, it's really hard in those situations if your opponent goes, okay, well, I won't do that, I'll do this instead. I think the typical one is like Auspex scan, isn't it? Where they come down within 12 inches and they'll go, okay, well, I'll just move it just outside of it. But it kind of then makes that stratagem kind of like no point in having it, I suppose, unless they are happy to take the gamble. So what are your kind of... How have you used that into those style of interactions before? Because obviously Vanguard Tactics, we really like to talk about sportsmanship. So how do you deal with those sort of situations? Because I can see the argument from both sides.
So the most appropriate thing that you can do when you're at a table and you are putting down your unit, being the person that is, coming in deep strike and looking at something, is to ask your opponent, do you have any way to make me move slower? Like, the most common thing that you'll probably see is like Tanglefoot Grenade. It's just, you should be asking your opponent questions while you're doing things. You, as the person who would be getting charged, it is not really your responsibility to, aside from going, do you know what my stuff does? Which should be done at the very, very start of the game, especially if it's. I do it a lot with new players. I will coach them through things while we're playing them. Or people that are like, I've never played against this before, then I'll be like, all right, well, let me just tell you what my stuff does. Like, right off the bat. And then throughout the game, I'll be like, remember, I have this thing that happens. But definitely, if it's the top, like, say, for lack of a better term, it's the ninth game of LVO, and somehow I got there as the person with the inexorable stuff. If they put their unit down after my initial statement of, by the way, I have all these things at the start of the game, then it's their responsibility at that point to either clarify or make sure that they understand what's going on.
Yeah, no, do you know what? I absolutely love that, and I think it's actually something on my academy. I have a lesson talking about how to analyze your opponent's list and what questions you need to ask pre-game. So if you know there's certain things, like from a Blood Angel player where I'm looking to, make charges, anything that can hinder my ability to charge is a big problem, right? Same with terrain, like area terrain that might stop me, or, -2 off my charge. That's huge for my type of build. So I think what you've said there is, when you are playing against somebody that is completely new to the tournament scene, it's their first ever event. I've certainly had it in the past where I've said, by the way, with my Ultramarines, I can overwatch with all 3 units, just so you're aware. So then later on, they know to make longer charges behind terrain if they want to risk it, or they can just, force me to spend the CPs, however they want to choose to use that tactic. And I think, yeah, it is really on the responsibility of the players to ask those questions, which, again, kind of alleviates that. And also, I think if you're having that conversation at the start to say, look, is there anything you want to know about my list? Obviously within reason, because you don't want to be there sort of 20 minutes talking through your opponent about everything that they can do. And obviously this is why I wanted to do this podcast, and especially with you, who's got such a great insight, but also, Don, I love the way you play the game. You kind of embody everything that I try to do as a player as well. So I think how you've sort of capitalized that is brilliant. But like you said, if you're in the final at the LVO, it's the player's responsibility, and at that level as well, there has to be some sort of line between, like, part of the skill in the game is knowing the rules in what everything does, isn't it? Like doing your homework.
Yes.
When I used to be a volleyball coach, I would watch certain, teams play, and most of the time they would set it out to a certain player on the court, so I would know particularly where to set up my blockers and things. So again, like the more homework I did on my opponents, I would see how they play, and I would see who their go-to players are. And it's the same thing, like there has to be that element in 40k when you are playing, at those top tables, and ultimately in a very competitive setting. And that isn't somebody that's trying to win at all cost. It's just rewarding the players that put the effort in and do their homework, isn't it?
Yes.
But I loved it what you said there about coaching those newer players and things, which I think is absolutely amazing, because we want everybody to make that transition as quickly as possible. Anyway, so sorry, Don, I know that we kind of went off on a bit of a tangent there, but I really think that's I knew you'd be a good person to talk to about that sort of like the gotcha moment element. So okay, is there then, so that's one sort of list concept with loads of assumed vehicles and things, and we can touch on your list in a little bit later in the army analysis part of the show. Is there any other sort of typical builds that we might see? Anything which is very infantry based, maybe with some of the Terminators? Any other elements there that you think, okay, if I wasn't playing this, I might give that a try?
Yep. So one of the other builds that you can do is with the much, much higher damage Plague Marines, which I know people have played against Plague Marines before, and they have bolters and plague close combat weapons, which just means that you get to reroll a wound. And of course, there's the flails, which do a lot of damage too and spill over. but people aren't used to equating or putting Plague Marines in the same boat as high damage dealers.
Yeah.
But one of the common things that I've seen, and I've even tried to coach a few Death Guard players on, is if you are able to load up a Plague Marine Rhino Rush type list with like Mortarian's Anvil or the Ferryman or the Wretched, one of those other play companies that focuses more on the Plague Marines, then you'll be able to get where you need to go, and then with the combination of certain characters, you can make their damage potential go absolutely through the roof, whether it's through massive amounts of mortal wounds, or whether it's, primarily mortal wounds, but there's also like the infinite grenade stratagem, things like that. Or I shouldn't say infinite grenade, blight bombardment is the right term for it, but it's basically whatever they look at is dead.
Yeah.
It's just how it works. It's a Titan, it's dead. If it's Centurions are probably dead. It does too much damage if you get within that. Used to be 6 inches with War of the Spider. It's now up to 12 inches from them.
Wow, yeah, that's very good. Like I had when I played Alex, he came down in a termite drill, and then I just lost 5 aggressive straight off the bat. So how does that combo work? How many CPs do you have to use? Can you combine that with Veterans of the Long War? What's the kind of deal with it? So if you've, let's say, got 10 Death Guard Marines, talk it through. What's the stratagems that we need to play and what do they do?
All right, so the 2 units that you are required to have for this are going to be the Plague Marines, which can be loaded out however you want, and then you also need a Biologist Putrefier, which is a little guy, runs around with a little injector pistol. Basically what he does is he increases the damage of your grenades to 2, and then every time you roll a 6+ to wound, it causes a mortal wound on top of that. And hold on just a second. Had a frog in my throat.
No worries, mate.
All right. And it also makes the strength of the grenade go from 3 to 4.
Wow, that's big, yeah.
So long as he's within 3 inches of that unit can use that profile on their Blight grenades.
Okay, yep.
As you are probably aware, the Blight grenades, grenades in general, you can throw 1 per unit. There's a stratagem called Blight Bombardment that lets every model in that unit throw a grenade. So whether it's, 5 dudes or 20 dudes, everyone can throw a grenade.
Yep.
So with usually the 10 that you'll see popping out of a Rhino or a Termite drill, you'll see 10d6 of these shots, which also now have blast. So against infantry, it's kind of funny. But they are 6 inches. You use the Overwhelming Generosity stratagem if you're not within range, which increases the range of plague weapons by 6 inches. So it can make it go to 12 inches away.
Is that 1 CP?
It is also 1 CP.
Okay.
All these stratagems are 1 CP. It's great. And then the other 2 parts that you might want is a Chaos Lord or something that gives you reroll 1s, and Arch Contaminator. Because basically you're going to be hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s to hit. And then you're going to be doing Strength 4 hits, which you're going to want to activate Veterans of the Long War for, to proc those mortal wounds on the 6+s on 5s. And then because they're next to the Arch Contaminator or even a Plague Surgeon with the Toxic Tinctures, which allows you to reroll 1s and 2s on plague weapons, then you're going to reroll your failed wounds, and you're going to get just a massive amount of mortal wounds on top of all these AP nothing but 2 damage wounds flying out. So on average, 10 dudes is 35 shots.
Okay, yep.
So it's just, on average, that kills a knight, just with the amount of mortal wounds plus all the 2 damage failed saves.
And sorry, how do you get the mortal wounds? How do you get those?
Oh, so that's just being next to the Biologist Putrefier.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so they make them Strength 4, AP-, 2 damage, mortal wounds on 6+s.
Wow, yeah, that is incredible, isn't it? Yeah, sorry, I must have missed that bit earlier. That is horrendous.
Yep.
Yeah.
And while only 1 unit can make use of the Blight Bombardment to let the entire unit throw it, anyone at all that's next to the Biologist Putrefier gets that grenade ability So each squad, whether you have like, a whole bunch of little 5-mans or even characters, can all throw D6 shots of the strength 4, AP-2 damage, mortal wounds on 6 pluses, plague weapons.
And how many points is he?
He is currently, I think, 65. Might be
But
60.
bargain. He's in. He's in.
Definitely.
He's made the cut. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And that's 3 CPs basically. So it's 1 CP to everyone throw a grenade, 1 CP to get range 12, 1 CP for +1 to wound. With the 2 characters nearby, you're getting the strength 4, 2 damage from mortal wounds on 6s, and then you're getting the reroll wounds. Wow.
Yep, and you only really need that 3rd CP if you're coming around a deep strike.
Yeah.
Otherwise, for the most part, you should be able to get out 3, move your 5, and probably be within 6 inches.
Yeah, I'm liking that. And you can obviously, if you've got 3 squads, you rinse repeat that for 3 turns, and that is, most armies normally have 3 big heavy hitting things, don't they? Or you could probably split fire, couldn't you, and take out 2 other pretty durable targets. Like if you're up against, I don't know, 2 units of eradicators, you can split fire. I'm assuming, put 5 on one, 5 on the other, and
Definitely.
Yeah, that's very nice. Okay, yeah, I'm liking the sound of that. Okay, cool. So are you running, can you see like a benefit of running 2 different detachments then? So you can take a little bit of both, a bit of the engines and a bit of the kind of infantry, or do you, and obviously you said earlier you love a good skew list, so are you kind of really building to one of the extremes there at the moment?
I currently am. And so the only reason why I would not do that is because the Demon Engine lists use a whole lot of CP pre-game.
Okay.
Whereas the infantry heavy lists like to use CP during the game, so they're fighting for that. Like my inexorable list I've been playing with starts the game with 2 CP, so it's hard to use the big explosive CP bombs.
Yeah, yeah. And is there anything like we can do? Any sort of builds we can do with some of the big Terminator units? Because obviously some of those models are just incredible, aren't they? Like the Death Shrouds and things. So is there any sort of builds you could see? Actually, I might be tempted with that. Any strong combos you can think of?
Yep. So there are 3 play companies that work really well for them. There's the Mortarian's Anvil that has the stratagem of -1 damage to Terminator unit. So that works really, really well. The relic in there is also every time you roll 6 to hit, hits twice. So there's that beautiful part, which, I mean, just Blight Lords are great as far as just being able to plunk down an area and say, this area is mine.
Mm-hmm.
No one else can have it.
Yep.
Another one is the Ferryman, which they have a whole lot of synergies as far as how you're able to get your like auras to overlap and whatnot for the Terminators. It works really well with the Lord of Contagion too, which is the Terminator Special Death Guard HQ.
Okay. Yep.
And then of course there's always the Death Shrouds work really well in Mortarian's Chosen Sons, because they have a stratagem that increases the damage on the plague flamethrowers that infantry can use,
Right.
from 1 to 2. And each of those Death Shrouds has a Plague Spurt Gauntlet, which, if you don't know what that is, I would not be surprised. It is a pistol flamer that has a range of 6 inches, but you can de-strike them down and basically do the same thing as far as the overwhelming generosity to increase the range to 12. And then you can use Veterans and Long War to make their Strength 3 flamers basically wound everything in the game on 5s or 4s, or 3s if it's an elf. And then the other stratagem is you make them go from damage 1 to damage 2, and those are also plague weapons, so you can just mow things down with those.
And what's the AP on those? 0 or -1 or anything?
It is AP 0.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the big thing with Death Guard is they don't have a whole lot, much more than like AP 2, which is primarily their close combat. AP 1, they have some shooting, but it's normally on their tanks. And then almost everything else is AP nothing. But if it gets through, it hurts.
Yes, yeah. And you're just going to put out so many attacks, aren't you, that are automatically hitting with those flamers. And, I mean, I'm sat here thinking, I had no idea what that pistol was. But, yeah, I can certainly see these sort of builds come together. And it actually sounds like whichever kind of way you want to go with the Death Guard, there's some utility there, isn't there? And there's some play, which is what it's all about.
Definitely. There are so many ways to play Death Guard right now that It's very common in the Death Guard groups that people are like, well, I like this, and someone's like, well, I found this other thing to be really good. Like all the play companies are good.
Yeah.
There's not a single one among them that you look at and you're like, this is a stinker. No, they're all amazing.
Well,
Which
that's really different as well for Chaos, isn't it? Because normally you're like, well, this is good, but that's a bit meh. So, yeah, that's really nice.
definitely. I just want to talk about one more play company because it benefits a core mechanic that Chaos used to be, this is laughable, and in ninth edition I think it's actually really really good, which is the Wretched. It's basically the play company that benefits your psychers mostly, but it also has a stratagem that makes it that you can do demonic ritual, the summoning in demons, and you just roll a d6 and add 7 instead of doing your normal thing. The reason why I'm bringing that up is that I've found that demonic ritual is actually super potent in ninth edition, primarily because now you cannot bring in extra detachments without having to spend CP, and it allows you to very much so tailor both your secondaries and your basically what your army brings against your opponent. And the reason why I'm saying secondaries is like even something as small as while we stand, we fight. You can literally have 3 90-point dudes that are sitting, under a tree somewhere, just hiding. That are your while we stand, we fight guys, which is the secondary for the 3 most expensive guys who just have to live through the entire game.
Yep, I love that one.
But meanwhile, you can summon soul grinders in front of them, or you can summon great unclean ones, or these things that are multiple 100-point units or multiple 100-point models, and just plug up the board with it. I'm actually a super huge fan of the Beast of Nurgle, but yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how that mechanic went from something that people are like, this is a worthless mechanic, I'm never going to use it, to now it's something I very commonly use in my current list.
Yeah, because I suppose with the changes to Lookout Sir, you can now bring down those units just to keep protecting those key characters, can't you?
You can.
Yeah, really like that, and I think that's a really good workaround with these changes. I think any time there's a core rule mechanic change, you think, okay, how do I get around that? Rather than, crying or whinging about it, you go, okay, it's a problem. How do I fix it?
Definitely. And there's one thing I like about ninth edition. It's you get to finally open your codex back up, look at all the units that used to be laughable, and put them on the table and realize that everything has a place now.
Yeah.
Or at least it feels like it.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, in terms of then secondaries for the Death Guard, what are you kind of, what do you think are going to work well? You've mentioned While We Stand, We Fight. Any others you think, okay, this could be quite good in this edition for a Death Guard player?
So it does definitely depend upon, though the one that you're always going to take as a Death Guard player is for the regular missions, it's called attrition. For the GT missions, it's called grind them down. Because normally you can outkill what your opponent can do back to you.
Yeah.
So that's just 3 points for the GT or 4 points for the regular missions every turn, effectively, that you're getting.
Yeah. And it is the old version of kill more, isn't it, in the ITC?
Yes.
And even if you get that for 3 turns and you get 9 points off that, that's not a bad going.
Definitely. And that's one of the other things I've had to train myself on, is to not look at what I can get 15 of, not look at what you can get maxed on, just something that you can get a decent enough amount of points to give yourself a nice little bubble.
Yeah, because if you can get, 40 on the primary, which you should be aiming for, I think, after the games I've seen, and you get a good, 36 on the secondaries, so you only need to get 12 on each one, or a 9 on one, a 15 on another, for example, averagely, then you're finishing the game with 86 points. You should win it.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that is a mistake to go, oh, well, I can't do this because I can't get the 15. Well, that's fine. You don't have to. And I think that's really where the secondaries are a real kind of like, there is a real decision-making process there. It's not as automatic as it used to be in the ITC to go, okay, well, I'm gangbuster that, I'll mark for death this, and I'll go recon. You've really got to think now. In some armies, just the only thing I don't like at the moment about it is that some armies hemorrhage certain secondaries, and other armies are really, really hard to score against.
Definitely.
But I really like there to be some, and I hope there's going to be unique secondaries that, for example, Death Guard will get that will play really well to a Death Guard player. So you'll have your core ones, the mission one, and then your codex secondaries. That's what I'm hoping for as we sort of, as ninth edition unfolds, so to speak. So, okay, cool. In any sort of movement-based ones, you think, okay, this is a good one to go for, or like investigate sites where you're looking just to hold the middle. Anything there you think, okay, actually, that's, or maybe some of the psychic ones. Anything there you've kind of dabbled with or played with, or any that you think it might even be a trap, actually?
So one of the ones that's a trap, as far as the psychic ones go, that it does actually work really well against certain armies. Like I recently played against a Tau player and I used it, but against pretty much anyone else, I would not even think about using it. Is Psychic Ritual. It requires that you have a Psyker that gets into within 6 inches of the middle of the board and casts a Warp Charge 3 power 3 times during the game.
Yeah.
If you do, you get 15 points. If you don't, you get 0 points. So if your opponent has a way to get characters with shooting, or if they have a decent enough melee threat that they can get in and kill the character, or if they even have just denials where they can just say your charge 3 power does not go off, it's something that could be devastating as far as points go, because it's much better to get 6 points than it is to get 0 points. So look for the things that you can get.
And is that, in your opinion, does that have to be done by the same character or any character?
So it does have to be done by the same character. However, one of the things that you can do is, like, say turn 1, you get a guy up there, he starts casting, and he gets his head blown off. Then you could have another guy jump up, and then he starts again to try to do it.
Okay.
But basically, that first one that went off, that basically gets negated. It has to be the same psyker that does it 3 times.
Okay, right. Okay, I didn't interpret it like that, but that's an interesting. Yeah, okay, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that interpretation, because it does say it says pick one, and then it says any model. So actually, I think your interpretation sounds quite good there. And then also, I think, like you said, because there are some like Iron Hand's other, one or 2 CPs on a 4+ just stops that power. And that can be massive. And also, when you do a psychic action, does it then prevent you from doing any other psychic powers?
It does.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, is you want to make sure that the guy that you're basically sacrificing to do these psychic actions, whether it's mental interrogation or psychic ritual, you want to make sure that they are not your guy that is giving out the 1 buff you need for the game.
Yeah. Because often we normally take a psyker. So let's take my Noise Marines, for example. My Emperor's Children list. I have 1 sorcerer in there to cast 2 powers. I need warp time, and I need prescience. I can't afford to not get either of those off.
Correct.
And I do not, the reason why I'm paying the points is for that role in my army. I don't want to have to pay another 100 points for a character just to do that one objective that, like you said, if they've got, for example, character snipers or something, snipers that can target characters, it's just such a huge risk, isn't it? So, yeah, I must admit, I've tried that one in the past, didn't like it, and very difficult. And also the other one, which is you've got to be within 18 inches of a character, haven't you?
Yeah, mental interrogation,
Mm-hmm.
which can also be a trap.
Yeah.
If they have very suicidal characters, do not take it. Like, if you see Mephiston on the other side of the table and a Librarian Dreadnought, don't take it, because they will kill themselves before you can get enough out of them.
Yeah. And again, just explain how that works in case people are kind of confused with it.
So, mental interrogation is another, I think it's War Charge 4, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah.
But your Psyker does the psychic action, and he picks, well, basically there just has to be at least 1 character of your opponents that's within 18 inches of the guy. And the fluffy part of it is he basically just pulling the secrets out of their head, getting command point or victory points that way. If there are no characters left, you literally can't get any more points. And I have also seen people like iGuard players that will take their company commanders and huck them into a squad of like berserkers, just to make sure you don't get the points.
Yeah, just to deny you them. Yeah.
So if your opponent has suicidal characters, or if you have no way to stop the characters from killing themselves, then do not take it.
because combat is one of those things that if they make that charge, you have to fight against them. You can't just say, oh, well, I don't want to kill the character. You have to swing. And if you have a melee weapon now as well, you have to use it. You can't just do the old little tickle that I used to do with my Blood Angels. If you've got a power fist, you have to use it.
Yes.
Which is a subtle change between 8th and 9th that I think a lot of people kind of missed, really. But yeah.
It is so huge. I've had a couple times where I'm like, I just don't want to, like, I played against a guy that had Bjorn. He charged into my Mortarion, and Bjorn, of course, attacked first. Knocked Mortarion down to like 3 wounds, and he only had 2 CP to fight on death. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to attack it with my close combat weapon. And I'm like, crap, I don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
So Mortarion, of course, killed it because it's an Imperial fill in the blank. And it, decided to go with Pinchy Claw again and kill Mortarion. I was like, that's not good.
Yes, that's rough. That is rough. So, okay, then I think you've got some really nice elements there for the secondaries. And then in terms of like any sort of tips on deployment for the Death Guard player, do they want to, using strategic reserves much? Are you and obviously it does depend on the list build, right? But that's assuming you've gone for 3 Plague Burst Crawlers, you've gone for some 3 units of 10 Marines, some Terminators, like a bit of a mix here and there, a few key characters. Are you using strategic reserves to come on from the edges, or deep strike, or are you just kind of going all down in one and moving up in a big column, or are you kind of using terrain and spacing your army out across the table, trying to get width and use the outskirts of the table? Any sort of tips there for Death Guard players?
So I do think that Death Guard in particular, you are not going to use the strategic reserves unless it's for Mortarion or your Predators, if you bring Predators.
Yeah.
The reason for why I talk about Predators is because they still have the kill shot stratagem, which, especially in a vehicle meta, is amazing.
Yeah.
But it makes it so that you are basically guaranteed to bring your Predators off the board edge, unlock the kill shot, and just go ham on their vehicles. Yeah. Aside from that, Death Guard don't really have a whole lot of units that want to be off the board unless they already do like Terminators. Well, pretty much just Terminators. Everything else wants to be on the board, shoving forward. It's definitely, they play how you think that they would, from a lore perspective, where they're just going to grind forward and shove the opponent off the objectives. If you're not on the board, you can't really interact. And we don't have enough direct or high-powered shooting to make it a real game until all of our stuff is on the board.
Yeah, so it's, you really like... I think you said earlier, it's kind of a death by 1,000 cuts, isn't it, or mortal wounds, and you really need to start to close that range up. You've already analysed there a few of the key characters. There's so many synergies with all those characters, isn't there? And also you've got like the Flower Blight Storm that makes everybody fight last and things, and you want that to activate around, as much as you possibly can to protect your units. So yeah, I think I can definitely see that, and like you said, it's very thematic as well, which is good. So, going first or second, do you have a preference with the Death Guard, or how do you see that at the moment?
Usually, I don't mind. I played against a Tau player last night that was definitely a game of if whoever goes first wins. This guy had 32 Seeker missiles and stuff like that, so it really hurt when he went first.
Yeah.
But usually Death Guard are durable enough that they can handle going second. And I know a lot of people right now are really, really hyped up about if you go first, you win. If you go second, you're in a major hole. I don't feel that way so much so about the Death Guard because for the most part, like say that it's objectives in the middle of the board. Normally, if you're going second, that means that you can charge whoever's getting onto that objective. Or you're able to hide your units if you need to, so that your opponent's first turn, they don't really get to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, if you bring someone like Mortarion, he's not hiding anywhere, so he's going to get shot. But definitely going first, I don't think it's super major for a Death Guard army.
Yeah, I think at my event that I ran, the games rounds 1 and 2, we were looking at 50-50, whether you went first, you won or not. Do you know what I mean? Which is how it should be. And then there was another round where actually 70% of the players that went second won that round. And my event was one of the first GTs of 9th edition, so there's a lot of talk, isn't there? There always is in 40k. There's a lot of people talking Warhammer, but their experience on the tabletop might not reflect what they're actually saying. And I think one of the best ways to really get a grips with not only your army, but what things can actually do is to get it on the tabletop in practice. Is kind of what I always preach, so to speak. Like a lot of people said, combat's dead, but there's me thinking, okay, I think Blood Angels are still really viable. You know, I'm looking at Harlequins to be my next army. So yeah, I am actually, I'm agreeing with you there. I don't think it is a first or second turn game. I think you know, depending on the way you build, and now I really love the new, or not new, but it feels like it's new again, is alternating deployment. I think it's really brought back a skill element in deploying where, you know, do I put my character down first, or when I deploy my unit, do I put the character in the middle, and have I left room for that, or have I left him at the back and now he's too far back from where he needs to be, or have I got things that can infiltrate in, you know, if I do go first, raise banners in the midfield and then my opponent has to deal with those. So there's so many elements now which I think is really, really nice about the game, and actually my opinion of that is only happened because I've, you know, been fortunate to play so many 9th edition games now.
Definitely. And I'll definitely be the first to admit I love that you, even during deployment, have no idea who's going first.
Yep, I agree.
That alone is so much better than, I mean, granted, it was really, really fast with the last part of the 8th edition ITC, where it was like, I deploy everything, you deploy everything, I go.
Yep.
It was much, much faster. But that was for deployment. The rest of the game in 9th edition, I do feel is way, way, way faster.
Yep.
Like I get most of my games done. Granted, I run small armies, in probably like an hour and a half, if even that. It's
Yep.
just the game does not need to be sped up that much so on the front end to the point where it basically has no tactical thought aside from just I'm going first. I'm going to deploy everything online.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would agree with you there. And sometimes, like, some of my first turns have been super quick, you know, just bit of a jostling for position, and that's about it. But I'm gearing up a turn 2 or a turn 3 where most of the action will happen, and then most of the game in models will be removed in those turns, and then sort of turns 5 and 6 is, you know, again, a bit of jostling for position, claim any last points you need to, and then you total it off, and you've got your, you know, you've got your score on the board.
Definitely. And even when you're talking about combat being dead, I have to be the exact opposite. I think combat has become so much more potent, and I feel like shooting has died because, I mean, in comparison, because fly vehicles are not immune to touching anymore.
Yep.
And the amount of fly vehicles you'll just run up to with your Corn Berserker or whatever, and just touch, even if you don't kill it, it's only going to shoot at those Corn Berserkers. It will not shoot at something it really wants to shoot at.
Yep. Yep. And so you're in control then as the player, is what your opponent is shooting at, which is massive.
Yep.
Like, a lot of people have said to me, you know, Steve, Death Company, no, they're awful. You know, they can just get out with Desperate Breakout. You can't wrap in trap. I'm like, well, you can just wrap 2 units. You know, and I'm running a 12-man unit of Death Company, but they're like, oh, well, you know, then you're in the Horde bracket. Well, I don't care, because turn 1, I'm going to be in combat. And regardless, I'm probably going to die by turn 2. So whether I've got 12 or 10 models doesn't make any difference, because you're probably not going to be able to fire a blast weapon at me. Because if I'm good enough to get in combat with you, then you can't use your blast weapon anyway. And if I've done well enough, I can wrap 2 units. So even if you want to use Desperate Breakout, you can only do that on 1 unit anyway. So I think there's, again, you've got the theory of, okay, Desperate Breakout kills wrapping and trapping, ergo combat's dead, and Death Company now useless. But actually on the tabletop, these opportunities will present themselves time and time again, and the most skillful players will be able to analyse that and go, okay, I'm going to set myself up. So turn 2, I wrap 2 units. And that could literally be a Space Marine unit and a lieutenant, for example.
Yes.
So I think that's some really nice elements there that, ninth edition is actually bringing. Again, it's like, okay, here's a problem. What's the solution for it? Okay, so a couple of things then that I really want to touch on because we always do this section called Better the Meta. How do we deal with Death Guard? Obviously, you said they're super resilient. They've got this 5+ feel no pain. When they get close, they start to put out a huge amount of damage from either grenades or, crazy amount of flamer hits. And, Mortarion, when he gets close, he's a big problem. So how do we deal with Death Guard? What, if you were sort of trying to coach me to beat you, Don, what would you sort of be telling me to do?
So the most appropriate thing is to use your maneuverability. Generally speaking, most armies are faster than Death Guard, especially the Terminators. The Terminators are the slowest units in the game.
Okay.
Effectively.
Yep.
Do not get close to them. If you do get close to them, they will win. I don't care if you're a Bloodletter Bomb or whatever, you will most likely bounce off of them because they're T5, disgusting resilient. They do have the ability to just mortal wound you to death even with their regular weapons. You're not going to win that combat, or if you do win that combat, you will not survive what's about to hit you afterwards.
Yep.
Then, on top of that, play for the mission. Killing the Death Guard is not what you should be focusing on, especially in 9th. Killing is not really even that important. It satisfies a couple secondaries, and that's about it.
Yep.
And then ultimately, if you have the ability to, get rid of their buffing characters, because like that Mortal Wound Bomb stratagem that I was talking about, it really only works well if the Biologist Putrefier is there. Otherwise, there's no mortal wounds. It's only strength 3. It only does 1 damage.
Yep.
So, characters, mobility, mission. Those are how you beat Death Guard.
Yep. No, I would definitely agree there. Actually, when I played Alex, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, okay, you've got... and Alex is a fantastic player as well. And I was looking at his vehicles and I was thinking, I could go bring it down, but I'm probably never going to kill him anyway. So what's the point? I'm actually having to then spend resources firing at something that I just need to weather their shots for as long as I can. I need to hide for as long as I can from the direct weapons. I can't do anything about the indirect weapons, but I can hopefully weather that. But trying to kill them just means I can't deal with all the Death Guard that are running at me, all the Nurglings that are on objectives that are winning him the game. And it's a real issue because you're thinking, this is a threat to me, but in 8th edition, where it was a very much more killing, destroying game, where you're trying to analyse your opponent's threats on the table is what can deal the most damage to you, but actually what deals the most damage is what's scoring points on the primary or on their secondaries.
Yes.
So, like you said, they're really utilising their, mobility or your army's mobility. So going for things like maybe engage on all fronts could be quite a good one as a good secondary against a Death Guard player, couldn't it? Because that's exactly what you want to be. You want to be skirting around the edges. Yep,
it definitely can be, or even like Line Breaker, because Death Guard normally wants to just move forward and grind you down. So most of the time they tend to leave their backfield open, unless it's, like Poxwalkers and Nurglings.
So you could then have like deep striking with my Ultras, for example. I used 3 units of Inceptors for that exact role. Just deep strike them down in a corner, and you've got to actually put a lot of resources to come back and get me. But otherwise, they'll max out Line Breaker for me.
Yep.
So that's a nice one, obviously, as well. Okay, cool. And then things like, is the Death Guard player going to be getting the board in terms of the hold more, or is that something you should be looking to do, is try and get the hold more, or should you just commit to getting hold 2, getting your 40 points, and not trying to stretch yourself too thin to get the hold more? Is that, because obviously Death Guard, they've got a lot of objectives, secure troops with the with just their regular Marines, haven't they? So where do you see them sort of playing the primary and getting that hold or hold more?
So definitely hold more, if you can get it, is great. Holding 2 is a must.
Yeah.
Because Death Guard, like I said, they can spread out, take a fair bit of the board, which means that they're usually holding at least 2 objectives or more on especially the 6 objective missions.
Yeah.
And you can try to take it from the Death Guard player, but if you can not take it from the Death Guard player and still hold your 2, you're good.
So going for domination would be a big trap then, or something like investigate sites where you want to try and hold the middle, because the Death Guard player wants to be in the middle, doesn't he?
Yes. That's one of the common things that almost every Death Guard player will tell you, is throughout 8th through and now throughout ninth, their golden bread and butter place is if they can set up in the middle, then they're golden.
Yeah. Do you think they're like the combat in close range version of Tau in that respect?
They definitely can be. The only difference is that they can do a lot more mortal wounds than Tau, but yeah, as soon as you get into that little bubble, it's a very bad place to be, which I probably say is anywhere between probably 15, 16 inches from any of the Death Guard units.
Okay. Nice. I think that's quite good. And then, like you said, so if I'm looking at this, but what you're telling me is don't try and kill you. Only kill what I kind of have to. That's, potentially winning you the mission. Skirt around the edges, sort of pull you apart as much as I can, pull you away from your key characters if I can't target your characters. And if I do get line of sight on them, make sure I'm killing them off, because obviously that massively reduces your damage output. Would you say that's a fair synopsis of how to beat the Death Guard?
Yes.
Okay, nice. Honestly, that's wicked. I'm learning loads here as well. So, yeah, I promise I won't use it against you, though, if we ever play at the LVO or something.
Sounds good.
Okay, so Dom, do you mind going over, obviously we always do this section called Army Analysis. Do you mind going over what your current list is and maybe some of the reasons why you've constructed that in the way you have?
Yep. So my current list has a Supreme Command of Mortarion, who is the Warlord because he's in the Supreme Command spot.
Love it.
Then we have a single Spearhead of the Inexorable Plague Company with a Demon Prince with wings and a sword. And one of the reasons for the sword is that there's a stratagem that if he's attacking infantry unit, gives him an extra 3 swings, and the sword now costs less than the double claw. So it became very, very useful to do that. Then we have 2 Fetal Drones, which are the floaty drone dreadnought things.
Okay, yep.
Have little turbines on them. They have a heavy Blight launcher each, which is a weapon that people are not familiar with because people are used to seeing either the Flesh Mower, the close combat weapon, or they're used to seeing the double flamers.
Okay.
The heavy Blight launcher is a 36-inch Assault 6, Strength 6 AP2, D3 damage plague weapon. So it basically is an extra long punch to an army that, generally speaking, likes the 24-inch band more. Then we have 3 Plague Burst Crawlers with the Plague Spitters and the Heavy Sluggers. And then we have 3 Defilers with the Defiler Scourge and the Reaper Autocannon, all with Contaminated Monstrosity, which gives them all disgusting resilient.
So how'd you get that?
So Contaminated Monstrosity is a stratagem that came in War of the Spider that allows you to, for 1 CP, give a unit of 12 or less wounds, disgusting resilient, or 2 CP for a unit of 13 plus wounds, disgusting resilient, which defiles to 14 wounds, so it takes 2 apiece, which is one of the reasons why I start the game with 2 CP.
Okay, nice. And is that not a stratagem like you can use it multiple times then? It's not one. Okay.
Yeah, so it's not once per game, and because it's not during a phase, you can use it as many times as you want.
Okay, cool. And again, please forgive my ignorance. So the Defiler, is that actually in the Death Guard book?
It is.
Okay.
It was just, unfortunately, especially with last edition, you had the penalties for moving and shooting.
Yeah.
And then you had all these armies that built around negative to hit modifiers, so you could not hit things.
Yeah. And
so
you couldn't put a Lord Discordant in either, could you?
No, because Lord Discordants are just Chaos Space Marines.
Yeah. Yeah. Because obviously they give you +1 to hit, don't they, normally?
Yeah, if they allowed a Lord Discordant for Death Guard, you'd see that in every Death Guard army.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't see why not. Yeah. But it sounds like Death Guard are in an okay place anyway at the moment. So
yes.
How's your list working then? Obviously, you've got so many vehicles in there. Like it is an extreme list. First of all, when you're listing off Mortarion. Sorry, is there anything else in the list, by the way?
So I have 105 reinforcement points.
Okay.
Which I use pretty consistently to summon an Epidemus,
okay.
Who is, for those of you that are not familiar with the named Nurgle Herald, basically what he does is, so long as he's on the table, anytime a Nurgle Demon unit, friend or foe, kills any unit, friend or foe, whether it's from explosions, attacks, psychic powers, whatever. He adds one to his tally, and he gets certain buffs that go out to all Nurgle demons, which applies to all those Death Guard demon engines and Mortarion and the Demon Prince, which goes from I'll just run through them all real quick. So at 2 kills, it's real ones a hit. 3 kills plus 1 movement. 4 kills plus 1 strength. 5 kills plus 1 toughness.
Wow.
6 kills is plus 1 attack, and 7 kills is reroll 1s on disgusting resilient.
And is that an aura around him or just table wide?
It's table wide, so long as he's alive.
Wow. Okay.
So usually first turn you have one. Most of the time I use the Demon Prince. He stays put. I use 1 CP because I hysterically have failed this twice in a row before. But basically how Demonic Ritual works is you roll 1, 2, or 3 dice, and whatever the result of those dice are is the power level that you are allowed to summon in. You do have to pay the points for that unit.
Yep.
And then if you roll any doubles, you take a mortal wound. If you roll a triple, you take D3 mortal wounds. After I played a game where the first 2 turns I rolled triple 1s and then 1, 1, 2, I started using a stratagem from the Death Guard Codex, which is things called Dark Pact. What it does is when you use your Demonic Ritual ability, you instead roll 4 dice and do not suffer perils no matter what you roll.
Happy days. Yep.
Because it's very unlikely
I would be on board with that.
Ones.
Yeah. I can definitely see that happening to me. Yep.
Yeah, it definitely allows, and it's just 1 CP, but it allows you to pretty much guaranteed get this 8 wound, toughness 5 cavalry guy that just makes your entire army just better.
So does that work on the Defilers?
It does.
So you could end up with, are they T8 or are they T7?
So they are T7. Basically, everything in the list is T7 except for the Plague Burst Crawlers are T8, and then the Demon Prince is T6. Everything else is T7. So
when you get, did you say 5 kills or 6 kills? You're going up to, Mortarion with toughness 8, those Plague Burst T9 and the Defilers, if they're still alive by that point, toughness 8 as well.
Yep, and yeah, it's 5 kills.
Wow, I mean, I love that, mate. You've absolutely smashed it. That's a lovely bit of tech, I think. It's not obvious, but again, this is where a player like yourself with such in-depth knowledge of those books can see the utility, and I absolutely love that. Again, it really, I think that's amazing. I love it.
Yep. And then one of the other reasons why I thought about bringing him is because everyone is so afraid of blast weapons, which I'll be one of the first people to tell you I think blast weapons are good. They're not going to break anyone's horde.
No.
So because people are so afraid of them, they're bringing all these MSU units like Eradicators, little 3-man squads, not hard to kill off. Outriders, little 3-man squads, not hard to kill off. It's not hard, especially with like little 5-man Primaris squads. Really easy to kill.
Yeah.
So you can just rack your tally up really quick.
Yeah,
which
I bet.
brings you to the point where you're just basically unkillable, and you are extremely damaging when you get there. I mean, Mortarion charging in with 8 attacks is beautiful.
Oh yeah, I mean, that is, disgusting to use words. Yeah, that would. So these stacks then with him, he gives you, like, you still maintain the one previous as you get more, or do you just like lose the reroll 1s and you now get the plus toughness, or do you just get all of them?
You get all of them so long as you satisfy the criteria.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. He's I think. Yeah, I'm really sorry we're doing this podcast because I think now everyone in their list is going to have this guy, but they can all thank you. I think, because I haven't heard of this before. So full credit goes out to you, mate, on that one. But honestly, that sounds brilliant. And do you mind if I share your list out with people? Is that okay?
Oh, sure.
I'll pop it on my blog post, and then, because I always do a blog post and show notes for each episode, so I'll pop it on there, and then people can have a look in a bit more detail. And if they're a Death Guard player, they can open up the codex, have a look at some of these weapons that you've kind of spoke about. But Don, I just want to say thanks so much for, number one, coming on the show, and number two, just being such a credit to the community and sharing all your insights and knowledge. And honestly, thank you so much. It's a real privilege.
Sure thing.
But honestly, we'll have to have you back on in the future, find out when you're back on the tournament scene, how your tournaments are going, And also I want to get you on as well when we can have a little chat about Emperor's Children, because I'm looking at some Noise Marine builds at the moment, so I think we could potentially do that in the future as well. And make sure you book out some time when, or if there's ever a new Chaos Codex, because I'm going to have to get you back on for some deep insights again.
Definitely looking forward to it.
Okay, mate. Well, look, you take care, and I'll see you soon, all right?
Later.
Once again, a huge thank you for Don for joining us today. I am sure you'll agree, but that was an absolutely epic and really valuable podcast. I know I took a lot away from it personally. So if you do like the podcast, remember, if you can please leave us a 5-star review over on iTunes, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen, it'd be most appreciative. And also, if you want to get a look at Don's list, then you can check that out over on www.vanguardtactics.com/blog/S2EP2. Now, before I go, guys, there's something really important I want to have a chat with you all about. And this is something which came up from last week's episode in which I recorded with Jack, all about my Ultramarines list at the Vanguard Tactics GT. Now, there was one series of stratagems that I used in order to make my company ancient have 2 Warlord traits. And obviously after that podcast went out, loads of people got really excited about it, and which is absolutely fantastic. And then a few questions came back as to whether I could do it. Now, I'm actually going to release a full video over on YouTube because it is a very sort of dubious interaction, and on the thread in Competitive 40k, it came up that some people were of the opinion that I couldn't use this stratagem in the way that I did, and technically had an illegal list because I used this one stratagem incorrectly. So I'm going to do a full video over on YouTube explaining how the whole interaction works, and also the implications which that decision would have had on the event. And as you know, guys, I really want to be at the forefront of sportsmanship and fair play, and it would have absolutely never been my intention to try and gain an unfair advantage against any of my opponents. So what I'm going to do is, again, explain what happened. Now, the full one will be over on YouTube, but if you are listening and you want to find out a little bit more, or you were interested in that Ultramarines list, essentially there's the wording from 2 stratagems that interact, and my perception was, and I got it checked by 3 other people at the event to make sure that it was okay, and they all agreed it was, so we went with it. And as you guys know, I was so concerned with safety of everybody, trying to TO and referee this event, that it's very difficult to actually make a hard down decision on your own list, which is why I got some independent people to review it, which also said it was fine, so we went with it. Now, just to make sure that everybody is clear that I was not looking for some sort of unfair advantage, and I've worked it out to be the difference of one command point in the list was essentially different between how you can make those interactions work, and the other side of the argument is where you can't do it. So what I've said is that I am more than happy to email Frontline Gaming and ask them for all of my ITC points that would have been awarded for me for that event. I think it was around 150 ITC points to be removed off my name, and also I'm happy to award myself a yellow card. And I've actually spoke to John, who's the head referee at the LVO, and I actually asked him what would have happened if this was the LVO, what sort of steps would have happened because of this. And he said it's a really difficult one with obviously the interactions with a pre-game stratagem. As you guys know, we misplay stratagems all the time, which is why there's such need for FAQs in the game. And the difference is that in a pre-game stratagem, which is misused, can have much larger consequences on the rest of the game. Now, thankfully for mine, I don't think the consequences are that severe, or the impact of the 1CP isn't too severe in terms of how my game's actually played out. But still, I want to put my hand up and say, look, I got that stratagem wrong, if that's the case. And I'm happy to have a yellow card because that's what would have happened at the LVO. But I'm also going to take that one step forward and ask for my points to be removed from my ITC rankings. And again, it's just a kind of more goodwill gesture to say, look, I'm not looking for an unfair advantage. I'm not trying to do these things to try and gain more points or improve my own ranking or whatever it is. My concern at that event was so that 30 people could enjoy 9th edition, and that was simply it, to make sure that they were sound and safe. And the ITC points for me are something that obviously they're really important, and you know, I'm not trying to downplay those, but in the context of what happened, it wasn't my priority at the event. So there it is from me. Like I said, I'm sorry to all of my opponents if you felt that you know, I did gain an unfair advantage in any of our games, and hopefully you don't feel like that. But again, apologies to all you listeners as well. And I just want you to know that every time that we do make these mistakes, and we all do from time to time, and I think the video that I'm going to put out on YouTube will really help us determine the difference between unintentional errors and intentional errors, where you're potentially deliberately cheating or unintentionally cheating. And sometimes you can do that to the detriment of yourself, and sometimes at the detriment of your opponent. I think it's going to cause a really, really good discussion around sportsmanship and fair play. So there it is from me. But a little quick fix for that list is, if you still want to have the chapter banner ancient, to have both the Warlord traits, which are the one from Faith and Fury to make sure that you are OBSEC, and then also the one from the Ultramarine book to allow you to heroically intervene. All you need to do is make him your Warlord, and therefore you can just spend the extra CP to gain the extra one, which is the heroic intervention. So you won't be able to make Calgar your Warlord, and he then won't gain you the 2 CPs. So essentially you'd be playing 1 CP down. However, if you do want to make Calgar your Warlord and you're not really fussed about the heroic intervention one, then you can just go with Calgar, give the additional one for the banner to make everybody OBSEC, and not worry about the heroic intervention one, and then put a CP back in your pocket. So that, you know, 2 ways of working that, both ways are fine. I would love for the stratagems, you know, to be looked at, and they are called Exemplar of the Chapter, which I was using after using the stratagem first of all called Hero of the Chapter. And my interpretation of that was, again, because this chapter ancient is not a named warlord, as in he's not a named character, he can then be given a second trait using the exemplar of the chapter. But there it is, and I think there's, you know, I had plenty of messages saying to me, yeah, I don't think you can do that, but I've also had plenty which say, yes, I think you can do that. But anyway, as I always say, I should have been better off safe than sorry to go, look, I'm just not going to use it if I'm not sure. But there we have it. That's from me. And guys, once again, thank you so much for all your support. I know last week we broke into the top 5 of the rankings for the UK, and I really appreciate all your support that you guys give us on the podcast, sharing this with your friends. Because here at Vanguard Tactics, not only do we want to help you become, you know, a better player by, you know, interviewing such great guests, and really go into these sort of top tier tactics, but also, you know, we want to be a beacon of light for sportsmanship and fair play. And as Mahatma Gandhi said, you have to be the change that you want to see in the world. So that is kind of exactly why I've put myself forward and said, look, I'm happy to take responsibilities for my actions. And yeah, that's where it is. So anyway, appreciate you guys, and I'll see you on next week. And we have an absolute cracker lined up as I interview tabletop titans and we discuss all things list writing. So until then, take care, and I'll see you then.